What is it that allows people to genuinely connect and thrive in their relationships and life, regardless of what comes their way? This series of interviews brings you insights from those who are successful in their relationships and life. Over the course of this series, I hope we'll discover patterns or themes which will help us understand the essential elements for connection and thriving. I'm Sherry Torres, and today I'm interviewing Melissa Robaina, Chief Operations Officer at the Center for Appreciative Inquiry. I've known her for more than 10 years, and in that time, I have experienced her ability to genuinely connect with others and to thrive in her work. She seems to effortlessly respond to client needs. Her work is creative and impeccable, and it's always done with the most pleasant manner. I'm certain she has something of value to share with anyone who's listening. Melissa, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me today.
Hi, Sherry. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I'm really grateful that you agreed to talk with us. And before we dive into the role that conversation plays in your work with clients, share a little bit about yourself and the kind of mindset that you bring to your work with clients.
When I first started with the Center for Appreciative Inquiry, I was the social media marketing specialist, and I had no idea what appreciative inquiry was. In fact, in my undergrad, I was a finance major. So what I was taught or trained to do was to look at the negative, what wasn't working. How can we minimize risk? So I was constantly looking at what wasn't working. So when I got a job with the center, it was a huge shift from what I knew. And so Kathy Becker, the president of the center, she invited me to participate in the facilitator training. And I was like, well, this is a great opportunity to learn more about, what it is the company does and a little bit more about appreciative inquiry. And so I went through the 4-day program, and people probably thought I was that, quiet one, but it was so much information, and it was overwhelming, but not overwhelming in what was taught. It was contradicting everything that I knew. And so it felt really uncomfortable. And, it took me some time to kind of make that paradigm shift. But once I started, putting it into practice, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but once I started to put that into practice, and instead of looking at what wasn't working, and instead of, looking at what was working well, I noticed that the relationship that I had with potential clients grew significantly, because now I was helping them to kind of start their own paradigm shift by just reframing the conversations I was having with them, either through the phone or through email.
And so if you were to describe what the mindset is now that you bring to your work with clients and prospective clients, how would you describe it?
I would describe it as a growth mindset. And I just actually learned a lot more about growth mindset recently from the podcast that I did. We talked about Carol Dweck, who is a professor of psychology at Stanford University. And I was really fascinated with, what is this growth mindset that she's talking about? But it's really looking at, when faced with challenges, do you shut down and run away, or do you, bulldoze through? And I bulldoze through, and I actually enjoy when tasks are somewhat difficult, because it requires me to think outside the box. And so I really, really love that part. So I would say I have a growth mindset.
It shows in the way you work with us. I'm so impressed with your ability to master anything that anybody throws at you.
Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about the role conversation plays in your actions, and how do you and your conversations support the relationships that you create?
Gosh, conversations are in absolutely everything that I do. Yes, at first it was in social media, But now, especially moving into a digital age, almost every conversation I have with people is either through Zoom or it's through email. So the conversations that we have are so important because at one time we used to have face-to-face trainings, but due to the pandemic, we've had to switch to an online setting. But I think, when I had the opportunity of meeting people, I had that, that connection. I got to see them face to face. But how do I now use conversations to develop that rapport, that trust through an online space? Because I may never have the opportunity to meet them face to face. So I put a lot of effort and thought into each email or correspondence that I send, because that might be the only time I ever have the chance of interacting with that person. So
that's pretty powerful. And when you say you put a lot of thought into it, what I know appreciative inquiry is part of the way you think. So if you were sharing with people who might be listening, what kind of thought do you put into creating either an online communication or something on Zoom like this?
It's very much like the facilitator training. So, in the facilitator training, you're learning how to craft an interview guide. And you're using that interview guide and you're writing unconditionally positive questions to elicit whatever data it is that you wish to collect. I bring that same mentality into my emails. Okay, so if I'm wanting to answer this person's question, or if I'm wanting to provide them with additional information, how do I need to form my emails so that I'm building that connection, that I'm answering their questions in the most appreciative way, that I'm getting the information that I need in order to provide them with even better service. So, I'll sit there and I'll craft emails, and, sometimes I'll have to step away and think, there's a better way for me to write that sentence. And so I'll give myself permission to kind of pull away a little bit. I know part of me wants to, reply back quickly so they have a response, but I want to do it well. Especially, again, if that's the only time that I'm going to connect with that person, I want to make sure that it's done well and in an appreciative way. So I spend a lot of time crafting emails.
So having been the recipient of many of those, it's clear they're thought out, and they're really well crafted in terms of responding to exactly what the need is with clearly. And if you have questions, you articulate questions really well. But it doesn't look to me like you spend a whole lot of time before you respond to me, because sometimes I get those amazing, completely beautifully crafted emails back with all the information, and it's almost immediate. So you must have gotten into the kind of a habit of almost being second nature for you.
I was just about to say, it's definitely a mindful practice, just like in anything. It's like any muscle. The more you exercise, the stronger it becomes. And because I've been mindfully practicing that for 10 plus years now, it does come second nature to me. There are times where, like a difficult client will, pop up. And at that point, you just have to slow down a little bit and give it the attention that it needs. But typically when I've put that much effort into my emails, it shows in the responses that I get from you or from potential clients.
What about that? You just mentioned when a difficult conversation or a difficult client comes up. What kind of internal conversations do you have to support your ability to still provide exceptional responses?
Well, actually, Kathy had mentioned to me, because there have been times where I literally have to walk away from the computer. And she'll just remind me, those are the people that need appreciative inquiry the most. And, it kind of, I'm like, you're right. You're absolutely right. But there is an internal dialogue that goes into my head. I'm thinking I did something wrong. I've said something that maybe offended them, but I came across the quote, and it was something about understanding that a person's behavior has to do more with their internal struggle than it ever had to do with me. That allows me to, or I've learned humility and grace through that. So sometimes I'll get some really nasty emails and I have to just think, okay, this has nothing to do with me. and I'm just going to reply. I'm going to continue to be me despite, what they're throwing at me. But again, Kathy's thing is, they need appreciative inquiry, more than ever. I'm like, you're absolutely right. So carrying that with me, that's what gives me the strength, I guess you could say, yes, to kind of push through their negative words or their hurtful email, but it's helped.
I don't think I've ever worked with anybody that is so responsive and so good in their responses.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? It's not just that you respond quickly, but it's thorough and complete and high quality and going above and beyond all the time.
Well, that was something that was taught to me as a child. My dad would always say, your work is a representation of who you are. And so for me, I never wanted to put anything out that was less than subpar, because I've always felt that would be a negative reflection on me. And then just through, working with you, working with Jackie, Jeannie, Joan, Kathy, I've really had such great mentors. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've sent an email off to Kathy. I'm like, there has to be a better way for me to say this, because, my little Latina wanted to come out and I just had to reel her back in. So, but it's been fun. It's definitely a challenge because, to put your feelings aside, so that you can continuously serve the client can be difficult. But sometimes it's just your ego and your pride getting in the way. And when you can set those aside for a moment, then I think you can really engage, because oftentimes when a person is angry, you have to, or like sending you a nasty email, there's something underneath the surface that's going on. And I want to find out what that is. And so again, using that appreciative inquiry or appreciative language, I'm able to kind of like slowly help the client peel back those layers.
And then they feel heard and they're not so mad anymore.
That's exactly what happens. They will later apologize, or, again, you just have to, especially as a facilitator or consultant, you have to learn not to take things personally. There's something bigger at play that's beyond you.
So what advice would you have for those who are listening to help them have conversations worth having with their clients and their customers?
I would say time. And I didn't mention this earlier, but for me, I think the reason why I put so much effort into my emails is because time is the one finite resource we have. Mm-hmm. So when a person chooses to either send me an email, participate in a program, I take that as the highest compliment, because there's so many other ways that they can spend their time. So one is to look at it as a blessing. They're taking their time out to connect with you either through Zoom or through email, telephone. And that's time that they could be spending elsewhere. So take that one as the compliment. Two is to give yourself permission to step back if you need to. You don't have to reply right away. If you're not able to reply in your true self, step back. That would be my second one. Third is craft your correspondence in a way that is appreciative, that you'll feel proud of when you hit that send button. Mm-hmm. You don't want to have like regrets, shoulda, coulda, woulda, said something different. So those would be my top 3 things that I would share with people.
And when you say crafted appreciatively, what do you mean?
Using positive language, affirmative language, asking questions that are generative, coming from a place of authentic curiosity. The questions that I ask people in my emails isn't just to know, well, what's your budget or how much can you spend? It's really getting to know them on a individual and organizational level. What is it that they would like? What is it that their organization dreams about? And getting into that bigger picture and connecting with them in that way. That's what I try to do in my emails when I say to craft them in a way that really connects.
Thank you so much for your time. And your wisdom and your experience are way beyond your years.
Thank you. Thank you.
For those of you who are listening, if you'd like to learn more about Appreciative Inquiry, please check out the Center for Appreciative Inquiry.net. You can also learn more about Conversations Worth Having at conversationsworthhaving.today. There's a free conversation toolkit there. What essential elements did you notice from Melissa? And be thinking about your own essential elements. When you're at your best, when you're most alive and thriving in your life, what are the essential elements that make that possible? Thank you for joining us.